This thinker studied the effects of economic change on behavioral patterns in the towns of Mojukuto and Tabanan in one work. In another work, he described the Swidden and Sawa systems of farming and examined the effect of Dutch rule on Indonesian agricultural productivity. This thinker described his method of ethnography, which attempted to describe the context of behaviors instead of just the behaviors themselves, as thick description, and wrote that man is an animal suspended in webs of significance he himself has spun, in a work that outlined his case for symbolic anthropology. For 10 points, name this author of The Interpretation of Cultures. And the answer is Clifford James Geertz. This thinker described an arc of culture that different peoples would draw from to create individual cultures in a work that used adjectives like restraint and abandon to describe different tribes. This thinker described a type of moral debt known as giri that is repaid through clearing one's name. This thinker analyzed the Zuni, Dobu, and Kwakiyutul in a work that defined culture as personality writ large. This author of Patterns of Culture wrote a book which contrasted Japan's shame culture with the US's guilt culture. For 10 points, name this American anthropologist who wrote The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. And the answer is Ruth Benedict. Unlike his students, this man believed the influence of language on thought to be of minor importance only. Due to his tone deafness, this researcher had difficulty studying a tonal language in Laguna, New Mexico. This man, who studied physics and geography in graduate school in Germany, became interested in his most well-known field of influence after taking an expedition to northern Canada, where he encountered and became fascinated with the Inuit culture on Baffin Island. This anthropologist spoke out against the ideology of scientific racism and introduced cultural relativism as an alternative. For 10 points, name this Columbia professor who created a 4-field subdivision of anthropology and taught Edward Sapir, Ruth Benedict, and Margaret Mead. And the answer is Franz Boas. This man worked at Mailu before his more famous work. This man argued that most psychological complexes are cultural rather than universal, most prominently the Oedipus complex, and while he was a functionalist, this man's work focused on culture meeting the needs of individuals. This man served as an advisor to Jomo Kenyatta and spent a decade conducting ethnographic research in the Trobriand Islands, writing Sex and Repression in a Savage Society and detailing the Kula Ring. For 10 points, name this Polish-American sociologist, author of Argonauts of the Western Pacific. And the answer is Bronislaw Malinowski. One of this man's works uses musical terms in every chapter title and heading. Those include Well-Tempered Astronomy, Rustic Symphony in 3 Movements, and Bororo Song. This man sought irreducible units known as mythemes. One of his works, whose name is an original language pun involving pansies, contrasts the engineer with a man who builds from the materials immediately available to him, the bricoleur. He recounted his journeys to Brazil in his memoir Tristes Tropiques, and included the origin of table manners and the raw and the cooked in Mythologiques. For 10 points, name this author of The Elementary Structures of Kinship and the Savage Mind, a French structuralist. And the answer is Claude Levi-Strauss. This person got the American Jewish Committee to study shtetls by interviewing immigrants in New York City. This person initially believed that women were dominant in Chambry society. This person, known for a signature cape and walking stick, analyzed American culture in And Keep Your Powder Dry. This protege of Franz Boas shocked viewers by descriptions of clandestine sex adventures and adolescence being the best part of a Samoan girl's life. For 10 points, name this protege of Franz Boas, known for studying sex and gender in the South Pacific. And the answer is Margaret Mead. This author of Folklore in the Old Testament described how Nicaraguans abstained from eating chocolate during the harvest in The Influence of the Sexes on Vegetation, a section of his greatest work, which also has chapters on Our Debt to the Savage and The Corn Spirit as an Animal. That work examines the relationship between customs, magic, and religion. For 10 points, name this Scottish anthropologist who wrote about shared folklore in his 1935 work, The Golden Bough. And the answer is James Frazer. This scientist was criticized alongside Gail Hudson for plagiarizing from astrology website Find Your Fate and Wikipedia in the original draft of Seeds of Hope. Alongside Birute Galdikis and Diane Fossey, this person made up a group of angels, and she first reported the 4-year War of Gombe. This scientist studied individuals nicknamed Frodo, Flo, and Goliath, and through observations of David Greybeard fishing for termites using straws, she found evidence for non-human tool usage. For 10 points, name this British scientist known for her studies of chimpanzees in Tanzania. And the answer is Jane Goodall.